Welcome to a presentation of the James City County Williamsburg Master Gardener Association. Today's topic, gardening for pollinators.
Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased today to welcome Adrienne Frank. I think many of you may know Adrienne. She is a member of the Historic Rivers chapter of the Virginia Master Naturalist. She's been a member since 2008, has held a number of board positions there. She's also on the board at Dragon Run, or Friends of Dragon Run, and the John Clayton chapter of the Virginia Native Plant Society. She also established a butterfly project for the Historic Rivers chapter and registered with the Williamsburg Butterfly Circle with the North American Butterfly Association. In conjunction with that, she also created this amazing brochure. She brought plenty to share with our group, which lists basically all the common butterflies in our area. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Adrienne, and we'll get started with our program, Precious Pollinators. Thank you.
My husband and I have been interested in butterflies for about the last 20 years. We got to know Tita Kane from Friends of Dragon Run. I don't know if some of you know her or not, but she got us to be very enthusiastic. And then we just kept on learning, and everything is a process of learning. So we keep on. So today's talk is a little bit about plants and a little bit about pollinators and their relationships. This is our front yard. Gary planted zinnias, and it just attracts an amazing number of butterflies. Even now, some of these cloudless sulfurs come to the we had 3 yesterday, so they come to these plants to nectar from them. This is a picture of our vegetable garden and our fruit garden. And so in the front yard, we have this picket fence that surrounds. It almost helped with the groundhog that we saw yesterday, but it doesn't really keep them out. So we have a variety of vegetables, and we have inside of this cage, which is like a chicken wire fence, and it even goes down into the ground. We have fig trees, blueberries, raspberries, and a couple of other things. So we're great gardeners as well as butterflyers, and it just is amazing how many butterflies have come to the garden. And so a lot of the pictures that I'm showing today are from the garden, and most of the pictures are local. I do get sent pictures all the time for like identification of butterflies and other things. So I have quite a collection of wonderful photographs from a lot of people. So today I was going to talk about butterfly attributes, some late summer and fall butterflies that you'll probably see in your garden, a little bit about bees and the plants that they're associated with, and a little bit about plants and native plants and gardens. So what's the life cycle of a butterfly? So this is just one example. This is the American lady, which is a fairly common butterfly for us. And it has 3 days, 5 days as an egg. Then it is a larva. And so that might be hanging on a plant or on a building. And then it becomes a pupa, and then it changes into a butterfly and only lives for about 2 weeks. So, 40 or 50 days for a lot of the medium-sized butterflies is about average length of life. So what does a butterfly do? It lays eggs. Can you see the tiny, tiny little dot on the vine? That's the egg of the variegated fritillary. This butterfly will go to a leaf that it thinks is good leaf, and it'll test it out. It'll kind of taste it, smell it. It will bounce on it, and it will see if it's nice and tender. And if it seems like it's good, it'll lay its eggs on there. So you can see what the caterpillar looks like. This red caterpillar with black spikes is the larva or the caterpillar of that variegated fritillary. So in the garden, we often see the black swallowtails. And this is an example of how the caterpillar changes over time. The larva has like 5 stages of instars before it becomes a chrysalis. So it gives you a good idea of what they look like. They look a little different as they change over time. The adult is just made for mating. That's basically what they do. Some butterflies don't even nectar. They just find a mate and procreate. Here you can see that some of the butterflies will be the same kind of look, and other butterflies will look very different between male and female. So with the cloudless sulfur, the lime green one on top is the male, and the orangey looking one with splotches is the female of the species. So you have lots of different parts on the butterflies. You have this long proboscis that sometimes rolls up and rolls down. With some animals, it actually will be in different parts and come out and down in order to wick up the nectar. So they have 6 legs, 4 wings, and a proboscis that wicks up nutrients. Adult butterflies often puddle. And so you'll see a group of them together on mud, sometimes poop. They like to puddle and pick up nutrients. Some of the butterflies that we see late in this season that I'm going to kind of cover are included on this list. So a cartoon. Just what's taking for so long? She only went upstairs to change. When I find anybody see any good insect cartoons, please send them on. Stages of transformation. So here is a monarch butterfly, and it is attaching itself to the underneath of a plant, and then it develops a chrysalis. As the butterfly it becomes closer to an adult, you can actually kind of see it. It becomes translucent, and you can see the butterfly inside. Then the butterfly comes out, and it has to take some time to pump up its wings. So it has meconium fluid, and it pumps up its wings with the fluid and lets them dry before it can fly. We were out in a field one time, and somebody comes running over to me and they say, "Oh, look at this poor butterfly. What's wrong with it?" I said, "Why did you pick it up? It's not dry yet." You see it all crinkled up and you think, "Oh, there's something wrong." So what's the difference between a male and a female monarch? These little tiny scent glands on the male, right here on the hind wing, that indicates that it's a male. Those are the glands that it uses. Host plants and nectar plants. As you know, milkweeds are absolutely wonderful for monarchs and for other insects. There's a lot of nectar on it, and it just attracts all sorts of things. So if you look at the picture on the upper left, you can see there's a monarch, there is a bee, there's a beetle, there's a nice bumblebee and a carpenter bee, all on this common milkweed. When the caterpillars really like something, what do? They eat the thing right to the ground. And we had a beautiful butterfly weed. It was this big, and the caterpillars got on it and they ate it so much that they killed it. right to the ground. They killed it. Monarchs and other butterflies can migrate or do migrate. And you think of the monarch migrating to Mexico. Well, there's also groups of butterflies, monarchs, that fly to the bottom of Florida and overwinter there, or fly to the bottom of California and overwinter there. They don't all go down to Mexico. When you go to Mexico and Central America, you see a whole bunch of butterflies that look like monarchs, and you think, well, where do they go? I have no idea where they end up. But this picture was taken over on the Eastern Shore. And sometimes what happens is they don't want to fly over the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, basically, because it's such a wide expanse and there's no place to roost. So they'll roost overnight. And you can see hundreds of monarchs sitting on these great big Solidago gigantea. I know one name, scientific name. So here's a cartoon. It says, I can't even read it. Pretty sure she's going to be upset if it turns out she's not a monarch. And here is a viceroy, and a viceroy has this extra line on it. It's a little bit small, but it has the same coloring as a monarch. So why is that? It's because the monarch doesn't taste very good, and so you have a viceroy mimicking monarch in its coloring. So we did a booklet, and we call it the annotated list. And it lists out every butterfly that has been observed in this area. And it kind of gives you an idea of when it flies. So this eastern tiger swallowtail starts flying in March, typically, and you can see them all the way into November, although I haven't seen one in a couple of weeks. Their habitat, they like mostly the edges of forests. And their host plants are the tulip poplar tree, for example. One spring, we were looking at some of the trees in our neighborhood, and all the leaves on the top of the trees were gone. And we thought, what's wrong with those trees? Later that year, there were hundreds of thousands of eastern tiger swallowtails. All the caterpillars had been on the top of the tree, and they were eating all of the tender leaves on the very top. So the females are dimorphic. So what does that look like? They can be either, if you look at the two bottom pictures, they can either be the tiger color or they can be a dark morph. But both of these females have that blue on them. So here is an intermediate female. So all sorts of different looks for these butterflies. They're halfway between the tiger and the morph. And then here is a really stunning one. So this is, there was a big discussion when this was first discovered. And is it a giganandromorph? I can't even say it. An abnormal individual, especially an insect, having both male and female characteristics. However, when we studied it a little bit more, on both sides, you could see some blue. So it turns out it really was a bilateral same-sex mosaic morph. How do you like them apples? All right, so a black swallowtail, this is the one that we see commonly in our gardens. I like the picture on the bottom because it shows the Monarda punctata. So the native Monarda, the native wild bergamot, which attracts a lot of insects. Black swallowtail, male and female, do look a little bit different. They're a little bit smaller than the eastern tiger swallowtail. So because they are attracted to and use plants from the carrot family, that's why we see them. So we have dill, and we have golden alexanders in our yard, and we have plants that have an umbral shape. they kind of, all the flowers sit up on the top, spread out. So those are the plants that those caterpillars like. Cloudless sulfurs, I don't know why, but they seem to move north late in the season, and we see a whole bunch of them now. When we've gone to the beach in late summer, you can sit on the beach and you can watch one cloudless sulfur fly across going north, and then another one, and then another one, and they just seem to fly up into Virginia this kind of time of year. There are medium-sized orange butterflies. One is the orange sulfur, and the other one is the sleepy orange. The orange sulfur, when it opens up its wings, you can see a whole lot of orange, and you can see orange in the first part of the close part of the forewing. And so sometimes the butterfly will look very light, but still there's an orange tinge right there, and it's an orange sulfur. So the thing that's very interesting is that you can have a white one. So at the bottom of the left, you can see the butterfly is kind of greenish and white, and that's still an orange sulfur. On the other side is the sleepy orange, and the sleepy orange, if you look on the orange sulfur, you can see that it has eyes. So you see the little round markings, and they're kind of open. Well, the sleepy orange got its name because it's got closed eyes. It's sleepy. They're really beautiful. Late in the season, they can be so dark and rich in color. They're really gorgeous butterflies. They can be really light or they can be really dark. All right. So this is another butterfly that migrates, and this is the common buckeye. And we were standing at Croker Landing on the York River, and there were hundreds common buckeyes, and they were all sitting on this bone set getting some nectar. These butterflies, they don't migrate very far, but they're migrating kind of up and down the rivers around us. So here's a bunch of different colors. So the sleepy orange can be really, really light in the spring and gets darker and darker over time. The buckeye, there's actually two different versions of the buckeye we found. One is kind of a dull brown, and the other one can be a beautiful rust color when its wings are closed. So it's just observing nature is just absolutely wonderful. Here is a painted lady, and the painted lady, this shows the different parts. If you know the parts, you can help identify what it is. You can talk to other entomologists to identify the butterfly. Here's the closed wing, and with the painted lady, you can see there are 4 little dots on the hind wing. Here's the American lady. The American lady has 2 big brown eyes and 1 extra piece of jewelry, or as my husband says, the 2 houses of Congress and 1 president. He was a geography and government teacher, so he likes that analogy. How long do butterflies live? Well, some butterflies are very small and delicate and only live a few days, where others can live for 12 or 18 months. So the painted lady is a big migrating butterfly. It's medium size, but it migrates really far in Europe. It goes from like the top of Scotland all the way into northern Africa. So it has a big migratory range. The monarch you know about, but the mourning cloak stays here but it can live over winter in tree bark. So it might live for 18 months. And it's usually the first butterfly that we'll see sometimes in January or February on a warm day. If the bark gets warmed up, you'll see it flying sometimes in the woods or on the edge of the woods. So old field or frost asters, the asters that kind of come out this time of year, are host plants for pearl crescents. Here's a pearl crescent nectaring on mist flower. So you might see this small butterfly this time of year. This is a favorite, this long-tail skipper. It can be absolutely beautiful. The color, the blue color of its thorax and abdomen is just gorgeous. And it has this really long tail, unless somebody has tried to eat it and the tail is gone. Because that does happen. So that we saw that in the garden yesterday. And an Ocola is usually late in the season. That's a skipper of kind of one of the last genetic groups in the book. So here is this long tail. Isn't that something? And you can see its proboscis all curled up. That it will let down when it's nectaring. So the long-tail skipper comes to our yard. It nectars on the lantana or those red zinnias, and then it lays its eggs on our green beans. Yesterday there were about six. I found 6 tiny little caterpillars underneath these like protections that they have cut out of the leaf. So they go around, they cut around the edge of it. If you look in the upper left-hand side, you can see one of the tiny little caterpillars, and so it cuts it, and then it pulls it over, and it holds it shut with a little bit of silk until it gets bigger. And on the right, you can see how the caterpillar lives as it changes in its instars and gets bigger. So here, lantana, wonderful non-native plant that we have used for attracting butterflies. There's a long-tail skipper, but now I'm looking and I can also see a gray hair streak close to Gary's elbow. Silver-spotted skipper is fairly common in our gardens. And over at the botanical garden, if you look at the wisteria that's growing, the American wisteria, sometimes you can find caterpillars for those hiding, taking the leaves and turning the leaves over for protection. Little checkered skipper, tiny little thing. This time of year, I don't know what that is. Okay. Here is a skipper, a tiny skipper on yellow crownbeard. And if you've noticed along the roadways recently, the crownbeard is just starting to wane. But we had really, really large fields almost of the yellow crownbeard this year. At least along our roadside, we had a lot of it. All right, so here's the Ocola, and it just loves that narrow leaf sunflower. Really, it can be really tall in our yard, and it blooms really late, but it's a wonderful thing late in the year in order to attract the butterflies. Clouded skipper, it's a very tiny, very dark skipper, but it also likes this time of year. Sachem, we've had sachem in the yard yesterday, several of them, and they can look very different. The male kind of looks almost all orange, but you can see a faint picture of the chevron in its wings. The female can look brown, and you can see that chevron fairly easily. The sachem male will have this dark stigma when its wings are open. Fiery skippers can be very yellow looking, or they can be a little bit dull, but they are frequent visitors to the garden this time of year. Most of the smaller butterflies, the skippers, have host plants that are grasses or sedges. And a lot of the experts don't even know which grasses those butterflies will use. We found one butterfly was actually using stilt grass as a host plant. So you just never know what they're going to do in nature. So switching gears a little bit, what are some of the other important pollinators? We have bees, butterflies, moths, beetles, flies, birds, and bats. And each are specialists. There are some bees, for example, that only use one plant. That's it. And if that plant goes, so goes the bee. Hummingbirds like scarlet or white flowers. They like long tubes because their tongue can be very long and reach in. Bats like night blooming flowers, especially if they have musty smelling flowers that they can be attracted by. Moths typically have a tent shape, so their wings go back in almost like a triangle. And if you're walking and you see something fly by and you think, oh, there's a butterfly, and then you can't see it when it lands underneath the leaf, then you know that it is a moth, because the moth will kind of hide and the butterfly will go and sit up on top of the plant. Flies prefer dull green, cream-colored flowers with translucent patches. There are several different interesting flies here. So up in the upper left-hand corner, there is a green-looking fly, and it's actually a nocturnal horsefly. So we have a friend, an entomologist friend, and I showed him this picture, and he says, "Oh my goodness, that's a nocturnal horsefly, and I've never seen one." And I just happened to be taking pictures of things in the garden, and it was in the daytime, and here was this interesting fly. So I'm very proud of that picture. Bee fly, it mimics a bee. Why do you think a fly would try to look like a bee? Because sometimes bees will sting, and the host, the predator doesn't want to get stung, and so if this fly looks like a bee, it's less likely to be eaten. The pawpaw is a host plant for a zebra swallowtail, but the pawpaw flower really stinks. It has like a musty, dead thing smell, and the flies are really attracted to that particular flower. The last thing that I want to tell you about is the robber fly and the bumblebee. So the bumblebee is on the bottom, and the bumblebee's eyes are on the side of its head. And the robber fly is actually killing the bumblebee, and its eyes are going straight forward. I don't know if you can see that or not. So interesting flies. Bees are mobile, so they can travel from flower to flower. They select a variety of sources of pollen. They hold the pollen grains on their body, so you can see all the yellow pollen all over this bee. And their mouth parts are very specialized for collecting nectar from different types of flowers. So pollen collecting hairs, or scopa, on their legs forms chaps. So here's a honeybee with chaps, and here is a bumblebee with chaps on its legs. Bee anatomy, they have eyes on the side of their head. They have long, slender antennae, forewings, stout bodies, and hairs to collect pollen. So if you look, you can see the tongue of this bumblebee going down into the orange flower. Bee life cycle, they have an egg, larva, pupa, and then the adult. most bees live in the ground, and they live most of their life underground as larvae. Their parent leaves a ball of nectar, of pollen inside of the egg sac, and that larva will eat that for nutrition till they're ready to turn into a, what do they call that when it's a silky thing? Okay, I'll remember that later. Honeybees. Honeybees, they're imported from Europe, and they are used to pollinate our crops. Farmers will take truckloads of bees and take them to those gigantic fields in the middle of the United States. The saying is, no bees, you don't have any ice cream. But honeybees do interfere with native bees, and the big plots of corn and wheat and grains in the Midwest, there are no native plants. Everything is killed so that you can plant your crop, and you have to bring in the bees in order to pollinate it. Some of the native bees that we have, common names: carpenter bees, bumblebees, mason bees, digger bees, sweat bees, leafcutter bees. Bumblebees typically have a two, their house is made up of two chambers. I'm sorry. And they kind of fly in and fly around one part of the chamber, and then the next part of the chamber is where they will do their business, for to say. That's where they will actually live and interact with other bees. There are some other bees that live in colonies, but they're really fairly few. Most of the bees are individuals, and they have their homes in little tunnels, either in the ground or in sticks and bark. So if you're trying to tell a bee apart from another bee, you have to look at their facial features, the length of their tongue, their wing structure, their hairs, their body, and their behavior. So there's dozens and dozens of sweat bees, but which family are they from? You have to actually look in a microscope or a hand lens to look at their mouth parts in order to figure out which family they're in. Carpenter bees are the largest bees that we have. They drill holes in wood. They drill holes in our fences at home. We have lots of them. But this was one of the more interesting things that I'd ever seen. This carpenter bee, the way that it pollinates this passion vine is that it actually goes under the stigma, and it gets the pollen all over its back. And then it goes to the next flower, and it does the same thing, and the pollen rubs off. This plant and this bee were made for each other. The bee is about an inch in size, and it fits perfectly in that flower. This bee is a wonderful bee. This is the mason bee, and the mason bee is a terrific pollinator. It does a better job of pollinating orchards than a honeybee would. And the reason that it's so good is because of where it collects the pollen. Can you see underneath its abdomen that it's all orange right there? So what this bee does, what the mason bee does, is it comes in for a landing on the flower, and it just like crash lands into the flower, and it gets pollen all over the place. And that's what makes it so good. It's very, the pollen really gets in there because of this crash landing strategy. Here are some smaller bees, and these, of course, were from the yard. So we have sweat bees mostly. A lot of the bees have stingers. The honeybee only female, Gary says. Okay, thank you. And the stingers of the honeybee have a barb on the end of it. And so the barb gets stuck into you, and you have to get that barb out in order to relieve some of the swelling. Most of the other bees have stingers that they just pierce, and they can pull it back out again. All of these tiny little bees have stingers, but they're so small that you can hardly even feel when they sting you. Plants for pollinators. There are bees that use any type of plant. So herbs, perennials, vines, shrubs, all of them can be used. Native plants provide nectar. They're hosts for the caterpillars. They provide food and shelter, and they're often linked to specific fauna. So it may be that a bee is on this particular flower. It might be that it's a bat that uses and pollinates this other flower. So they can be very specific. Native plants use less water and don't require fertilizers. You can plant a native plant in your yard, and the next thing you know, it's everywhere. Like we have goldenrod at the moment everywhere in our yard, but we also like it. The milkweeds, common, swamp, butterfly weed, and even a sand vine, a honey vine. If you break it, it has milk in it. All of those are host plants for especially monarchs, but other insects as well. If you look at the bottom right, you can see our butterfly bush with zebra swallowtails, butterfly weed with swallowtails all over it. That's the one that got eaten. Which is the native and which is the non-native? So you have three Monardas here. You have the scarlet bee balm, the wild bergamot, and the spotted bergamot or horse mint. The red bee balm is a cultivar. It's been bred, and there's lots and lots of them. You can get them in all sorts of different colors. Wild bergamot is native to the mountains of Virginia. And on the coastal plain, the native Monarda that we have is this punctata, which is a horse mint or spotted bergamot. And which do you think the insects like the best? The native one, right? The spotted bergamot. This is a recent favorite of ours, this blue vervain. We were over at Hog Island. We were doing a butterfly count, and all on the edges of the cornfields was this blue vervain, and it has really tiny flowers, but there were skippers all over it. And we spent an hour just trying to identify all the skippers that were using this as a nectaring source. Brown-eyed Susan, Rebeckias are native and used by a number of plants. Bear's foot or leaf cup. Right now, this is going to seed in our yard, and I'm going to collect some of its seeds. It's a very nice nectaring plant. All of the goldenrods. Donna Ware has planted about 14 different species of goldenrod in the botanical garden. And there are really only about 2 or 3 of the goldenrods that the insects really like. The rest they will go to occasionally. Sneezeweed. I was walking along my road yesterday, a small patch of sneezeweed, and there was a skipper right on it. Narrow-leaf sunflower, late bloomer. So here's Gary in our garden. And what have we done to try to attract pollinators? We made our garden beds bigger, and we tried to get rid of some of the lawn. What lawn we have, we tried to leave it a little bit higher so that parts of the grass could actually be used by insects. We try not to use any fertilizers or any chemicals that are not natural. And bug zappers. I made the mistake one year of putting out something to catch flies. And I had all these flies all over our fruit, and I wanted to get them, get the flies away. Well, that stuff attracted all sorts of different insects, and I felt guilty to this day that I killed all these other insects. You can plant in layers, so you have different layers of plants at different heights. One of the things that bothers me about our local parks is that they mow the lawn right up to the trees. And so there are no perennials, there are no herbs. There are very few bushes that are there in the parks. And so we don't have all that many butterflies or other insects in the parks. Plant islands. This is a nice way to get rid of some of the lawn. You just decide, okay, I'm going to plant a circle of plants. You put the biggest one in the middle, and then you put the shorter ones on the outside, and you have a plant island. So here we have a real combination of things, but we have a vine on the stem. And then we have these cup plants that are going to get really large. And then we put a devil's walking stick in the middle because the devil's walking stick has wonderful flowers for nectaring. And it also has wonderful berries that the birds need during migration time. We have water islands, and so we have an opportunity to get things like turtlehead and cardinal flower and blue flag iris in our yard. Planting for pollinators. We found that in the fall, you would have one plant that would bloom. So, maybe you have black-eyed Susans, and the butterflies and insects are going to that. And then that dies off, and you have another plant that they go to. Let's say they go to the mist flower next, and the mist flower dies off, and they go to the asters. And then even when there was nothing left in the yard except marigolds, that's where the butterflies would go. So they're looking for nectar. And if you plant for different kind of seasons and you plant for different times in the fall, you'll have more insects coming to your yard to pollinate your plants. Lawn substitutes. People have tried pussy toes and violets and even white clover. Now, white clover is not native, but it is kind of naturalized in a lot of places, and it has a nectar source, but it's much better than that red clover that people have used to cover their lawns instead of grass. So I'm not sure I really should recommend it because it's not a native plant, but it does help. And if you're moving in that direction and you still want a lawn, it's a good thing to have. Power lines are what the book says are prairie remnants. And so you'll find in our area that some of the native plants are kind of only left in the power lines. Our power lines are being taken over by some non-native plants now, but we've had yellow indigo, we've had sundial lupin, we've had two different types of the yellow one. Bidens is there. So it's just a tremendous place for our native plants. And we need to try to protect them. Fallen leaves often have eggs of the red-banded hair streak in them. So some people will advocate for not burning your leaves. or leaving your leaves on your lawn, or piling them up to the side rather than getting rid of them totally. Collecting seeds this time of year, excellent time to do that. I've collected some hibiscus and some mountain mint and some milkweed seeds, and we're going to see if maybe the Girl Scouts can grow some native plants for us. Okay, that's the end. Special thanks to all of these people, our mentors and people who took photographs and people who helped do our annual butterfly count every August. If you want to know some more good books, I can tell those to you, resources. This is me, in case you want to get in touch with Gary and I.
Thank you for watching this presentation by the James City County Williamsburg Master Gardener Association. Please visit our website for more educational videos at jccwmg.org.